Your Google Performance Max campaigns are probably massively underutilized if you don't understand how to properly optimize your campaigns. And honestly, they don't make it easy to really understand your data, understand how to actually optimize your Google Ad Performance Max campaigns. So in this video, I'm gonna be breaking down exactly the steps that we go through at my ad agency, JetAds, to go ahead and assess a Performance Max campaign, what data we look at, and how we actually spot key areas of weakness and areas that we can double down on to get better results from our Performance Max ads. So when it comes to Performance Max setup, obviously the first place that we want to look to is the actual ad itself. Now, obviously there's a lot of different settings that we could touch on when it comes to the bidding strategy and the exact audience targeting strategy, and we're gonna get to that. But the first place that you wanna start is your actual ad setup. And not only your ad setup, but your asset group setup. So if we come into my computer here, you will see we have this Performance Max campaign currently running. And you can see it's at a 5 ROAS, which is awesome, but there's always room to improve when it comes to running ads. And so if we go down to the actual asset level, this is the first place that you can look at to start optimizing your campaigns. Now, in this particular case, we have various different asset groups that we have split out based on different audience targeting. And so that's the first place I would recommend that you go ahead and look to, is to go ahead and look at, you have a cold audience, which is where we're targeting cold search terms and interests related to our actual audience. Then we also just have no targeting, which has no signals, which we found works really great in a lot of cases to just give Google the maximum freedom to go out and find our customers. And then we also have a warm plus branded asset group, which is retargeting on relevant search terms, and then our audience data as well. And so we separate all those out so it's not muddled and blended all together. We have them separated out. Another way that you can do a Performance Max, which I recommend setting up at the campaign level, is if you have very different product groups and segments and offerings. If you're a service business, you can separate different campaigns based on those different offerings. Because if you have a higher LTV, or you want to put a certain amount of budget behind a particular product group and obviously target different things for that product group, you want to separate a new campaign out so that the signals that they're getting and that you are able to add in here in terms of assets and the actual product feed that you're using is all relevant to that product. So once we have, the proper asset group structure, okay, and within each of these asset groups, let's first look at actually how to set up those asset groups for success. So the first thing that you want to do is make sure that you fill out all of these different things. Okay, so the first is your brand guidelines right here. So you want to make sure that you fill that out. It doesn't hurt at all. Add in your logos, both formats of logos and also your custom colors, and you can actually add in a font as well if you want to. So it's more aligned with your brand. Now, also make sure that your URL is aligned for your actual landing page if applicable, right? Make sure it's sending to the correct URL that most aligns with the product that you're actually promoting. And then you want to fill out all of these different formats, right? We fill out every single headline and every single description that we're able to. So you can see you have 15 headlines, 5 long headlines, which is the maximum, 5 descriptions, and then we also have 20 images as well that fit into this. And if we had a video, we'd add it in. In this case, we don't, but if you do have a video, definitely add that in as well. Then we have our site links, which are also filled up with all of our different product categories. And then we have our call to action as well, which is all set up at the asset level. Okay, so that's just really basic how to set up your actual Performance Max campaign. And this is how we set up the signals. So if you have your signals set up, this is for our cold campaign. In this case, we have all of the different search terms that are relevant for this actual business. And then we have all the different interests as well that are relevant. And we just stack those, we add them all together so that we can actually assess what return are we getting from each of these interests? And if we need to cut certain interests because they're not performing, we have the ability to do that by adding them in there. And if we're looking at the warm asset group, very, very simple. We're adding in our brand name as the main search term, and then we're adding in our data, which is past customers, website visitors, abandoned carts, things like that. Adding in just as much data as you really have on your customers into your data section, so that you can fill that all out. Now, next, when viewing the performance of these campaigns, when you already have a Performance Max live and everything's filled out, you go to the view details section, and that's actually gonna give you insights in how to properly optimize these individual asset groups. So when you go click on that, it's gonna open this up, which is gonna give you all these different asset groups that you currently have at the asset group level, and it's gonna show you what they are. If it's a headline, and it's going to show you the performance there. In certain cases, it might not have enough data, so you can feel free to go ahead and expand out that data range. You still might not have enough data. but that's totally fine. Come back here when you do have more data and you'll be able to see, if the performance is, in this case, you can see this one is best, this one is low in terms of a description. And so you can feel free to go through here, look through each and see what is bringing in the most conversions in that case, right? And what is ultimately what's Google telling you is a low performing asset. How can you switch out those assets? How can you add in more assets that are like your best performers and your good and best descriptions to improve your overall ad quality, right? Same thing with images, right? Some of these don't have data, which is fine, but some of them are top performing. Anyone that's low, in general, you want to go ahead and add and change that particular headline, description, or image, right? Switch that out, try to improve it a little bit, and Google will then prioritize that and test it out. And so you can see we have a lot of low performing headlines. And so a lot of these we can actually improve when we look at, what's the top performing one? How can we do more like that? And more like these, best performing ones. You can also see like top performing combinations right here, which is going to show you there. So you can kind of preview through this and just check out, what is your top performing asset groups there. And then you can also see how your listing group is doing. So if you have all your products listed here, you can see that. If you have multiple product segments, so you split out your catalog into multiple segments of products, then you can see the individual performance of each of those segments here, and you can turn off those individual segments, which I'd recommend doing as well. And that's another way to optimize. Okay, so now the next thing when it comes to actually optimizing your campaigns is to go to the Insights tab right here. And that's going to give you a ton of data points and performance on everything related to your ads in terms of targeting, the actual asset groups, the keywords, everything like that. So if you go to last 28 days right here, it's going to show you the performance of these and how that's changed over time. And so you can see here our conversion value, our cost, and how that's kind of changing over time. You can see the individual asset groups right here. And so this is sorted by conversion value. And so you can see the no targeting one is actually generating the most results, with the other ones not as much. And then you can see, where are the decreases there? Where are the increases? If you know what's performing best, then you can know, okay, if I try to improve this asset group in particular, that's what's going to give me the best results. And you can see that for each of these different tabs here. So you can see for individual products here, which one is actually getting the most actual spend. And you can click into this further. And so you can see each of these individual products right here, how much cost is it getting and what is the ROI? And so some of these products, right, are getting a lot of spend, right, like 475 in spend and haven't actually generated a conversion. So this is a product we might actually consider, pausing, turning off, or just removing from our product feed altogether. And so that's another way that you can go through here and optimize this as well, is just looking at, sort this by the cost, right, which it's already sorted by. And then you can kind of just look again, where are the biggest things that you're spending on that aren't generating you results? And you can also look at like categories as well, product types, if you have product types as well. So you can look through this as well. Again, all ways that you can kind of think about segmenting your products out based on the results and the actual ROI that you're getting. And so in this case, it doesn't show the cost per conversion. So you can go ahead and add that in as a conversion metric. So if we want to go conversion value divided by cost and apply that, then boom, we can see here, what's the ROAS on each of these individual product types. And so you can see a lot. Some of them are doing really well. Some of them don't have a product type. So we should probably get a product type on there. But some of them, obviously do and aren't generating any sales. Again, another area that we could look to cut to optimize further. Same thing with custom labels as well. Okay, so let's go back to Insights, and that's pretty much this tab here. So you can view your asset groups there as well. Next is what you can have your competitors here, so you can see who else is advertising on your keywords and exactly where you're stacking up and kind of how much room you have to make up. So in this case, we have Amazon and some other competitors right here, which are kind of taking the majority of the spend. And so, we have some of that impression share, about 24%, but there's a lot more room to get more impressions and kind of grow in this space. So, that's great to see. And we can kind of see, where we're stacking up against each of those competitors. Now, next thing is search terms. So again, you can change this to any date range right here. And you can actually view and see all the different search terms that you actually have. And you can browse through each of these. And so you can sort this by conversion value as well. And so you can see here, our brand name is obviously doing well. We've generated, a good amount of for all of these terms right here. And just kind of scroll through each of these and you can see, are some of these terms that you're kind of ranking for that you haven't added in. And you can see if you want to actually go ahead and add in those terms if they are generating you a good return. And then you can see a more detailed breakdown here as well for each of those as well. And then you can see the individual asset groups that those are actually in. to see if it's enabled on those asset groups essentially. Okay, and then you also have your audiences right here. So we have 14 different audiences. So if I expand this out to 15, what we can see right here, you can see the number of clicks and the index that we are having. So this is affinity. In this case, weightlifters is a popular one for us. The percentage share of clicks that we're getting on each of those individual audience segments. And so again, some of these, if we don't currently have them added into our campaign, we can consider adding them into each of our campaigns because there's a strong affinity for this audience in particular. And so we want to make sure that this as an audience segment, we're adding in to our campaigns. And so some of these aren't actually added in. And so we might consider adding them into our campaign. And so you can also kind of compare your campaigns week over week here and see some of the differences. And then there's going to be some other recommendations here. Like in this case, it's recommending us to increase our budget. So if you're wanting to scale your campaign, but at a certain ROAS target that you kind of have set, that's how we best recommend to scale. Set a target ROAS based on where you're currently at. So if your ROAS is currently at a 5 in this case, and we're comfortable scaling to a 4, but we want to increase the volume, what we could do is go to campaign settings right here. Then we can go to budget, then we can go to bidding right here, and then we can go to maximize conversion value at a target ROAS. You can see we already have 300%. So we have more than enough room to continue to push this budget up because we're achieving a target ROAS above a 3 or 300% at 290 a day. So if we continue to scale that up, it's going to continue to push it up until we kind of reach the breaking point around a 300% return on ad spend. Another area that you can optimize as well is the location. So if you're targeting multiple countries, go to the locations tab and see where are your ads performing best. In this case, the United States we have. And so if you have multiple countries, they're going to show up here, and you can easily optimize your campaign based on the countries that you're actually operating around to reduce the cost on countries or just remove them altogether that aren't really performing for you. And another great way to optimize within the country. So if you're only targeting the US or Canada, or you are targeting multiple countries, but you want to narrow down by certain cities or states, which I recommend on the state level. I wouldn't just kind of narrow down by entire cities, but you can go into the United States in this particular case, click on states, and then it's going to give you a breakdown of the actual conversions and the cost per conversion. And you can also go ahead and add in here conversion value divided by cost to give us ROAS. And so you can see here, California is at a 5.88, Florida is only at a 0.97, right? We have Georgia's at a 1.13. Texas and Tennessee are really strong. New York's not very good. Ohio, Illinois. And so a lot of these states are really weak, even though they've gotten, a good amount of spend. Some of them obviously haven't gotten a ton of spend, and so you might not want to consider adding them in. But there's a lot of states here that have a strong ROAS, a lot of states here that have a weak ROAS. A great way to optimize your campaigns is to go ahead and remove or exclude any states. I would actually just exclude any states that are a weak performer for you. And that's another great way to go ahead and optimize your campaigns further to drive more budget to the states that are actually giving you a better ROI faster than letting Google slowly kind of move the budget into the top kind of states, right? And if that ever happens, right, it's better to take control yourself, remove the states that are weak, double down on the states that are working well to scale further. And then of course you have the recommended tab as well, which we don't use a ton. It does give you an idea of how well Google thinks your ads are set up. It gives you some ideas for how you can better optimize your ads. So I'd recommend looking here too to see, some recommendations that it has. In this case, it's saying, add a video asset, which like I said, we should have a video asset. If we did, we would add it. And so, it's a good recommendation in this case. It also wants us to, optimize our budget. So increasing the budget. So it kind of tells you that if that's relevant. And then some other kind of small recommendations here. You're not going to get a ton of insights from the recommended tab, mostly from insights, and that's where you can kind of look to. And some other areas where you can also optimize further, you have devices, so you can see, what devices are your ads showing on, what's the return for those, does it make sense to cut any, particular devices. If they're not getting a lot of spend, I wouldn't recommend cutting it. Also, you can do it by, days of the week and certain time frames, and there's literally every time frame here by an hour. And so you can see, what's bringing in ultimately the most conversions, right? You can see those exact times. And anything that's, got a lot of spend that isn't bringing you in conversions, you might want to consider cutting that out as well. And another great way to actually get some further insights is to actually go to this generate report tab right here under report editor. And you can actually input things like this, which is a new feature that they're rolling out, which you can kind of, there's some templates right here where you can see, search keywords, audiences, shopping products, store location, paid and organic. You can also, what are my top locations? So it's kind of a way to simplify you getting that data so you can input, your own kind of description right here. So if it's, what asset group is performing the best in my campaign. Okay, so it doesn't look like it can actually do that, but let's just go who are seeing my ads and let's just see what it comes up with. Boom. So now it gives us a report here of our actual ads. Looks like there's some bugs with this because it's not showing any impressions or anything like that. But as they improve that feature, I'm sure that'll kind of give some more insights related to the demographics of your audience that you're targeting. And then lastly, for optimization, you have your assets, which we touched on earlier. But you want to make sure that you fill out all of your assets as well. So you have your logos, fill out your site link extensions, your callout extensions, and then look through these as well and see how they're performing too. It'll give you some conversion value here, and you can see which ones are performing strong, which ones could use some work. And you can even see like this logo right here is kind of like cut off, not quite sized properly. So that could be improved. And then some of these callouts as well. Anything that's performing really well, you can turn off all of the weaker performing ones that aren't really driving a lot of results in that campaign. So that's pretty much everything on how to optimize your Google Ads Performance Max campaigns in the best way possible. So if you kind of go through this checklist and in order, just kind of check out all of those tabs. It's important to have a pulse on a little bit of everything, understand the back end, and you'll optimize your ads a lot further once you dig into the data a lot more. Now, if you want more free training on how to run Facebook ads and Google ads to the highest degree possible, check out the link in the description to join my free school community or join the waitlist if it's not yet available. It's going to be an entire free course going over insights just like this on Google ads and many, many more on exactly how we run ads at my agency JetAds. So definitely want to go ahead and join that and check that out. Now, since I know you're into optimizing your ads, you're going to want to check out this video next.